Happy New Year, everyone. This is Blue TTCG back with another Vanguard deck profile, this time for Premium. And no better way to kick off the new year 2023 with an updated Silver Thorn deck profile. This is going to be a build for Leontina, basically an updated version of what I had shown previously, even before the Goman build that I showed in the most recent Silver Thorn deck profile. This is going to take into account some of the combo pieces that we received in a premium support set last year in P-Clan Collection 2022. I know this video has been long awaited, guys, but thank you so much for your patience. I've been very busy the last month or so, but the time is finally nigh for us to rise to the occasion, Silver Thorn players. And speaking of which, I do want to point out that this build is going to look a lot different about a month from now when we receive the new Silver Thorn cards coming in set 8 of Overdress, the Minerva Rising set. The build that this will, the combo that this build will focus on is more so just getting a lethal second stride Leontina with the full guard restrict as well as high numbers on our upright line rear guards, and it makes use of the combo pieces that Silver Thorn was typically accustomed to using, such as Selvia, such as Zelma, and then of course some of the new clan collection cards we got now almost a year ago in Anna and Maricica. So with that all out of the way, I do want to kind of point out a couple of things before we get into the deck profile. These are the gift markers that we have available. You almost never go into Excel 1 because the draw power you are sacrificing is just way too substantial, and it's almost never worth the extra number that you're getting. Silver Thorn's numbers are fine, especially with this build upright line, and our grade 3 turn is fantastic without needing to have the extra 5k on the marker itself, because Venus Luquier gives the extra 5k to front row circles, so it's kind of already given us that, it's kind of already making up for that 5k that the Excel marker would ordinarily give if we just pick Excel 2. So we always want to go Excel 2 pretty much, unless, let's say we're generating our gift markers super late in the game when we're about to dick out or something, then yeah, maybe Excel 1 makes sense, but Excel 2 is always what we want to do pretty much. And then notice how we're also running the starter Emile. I'll go over this later in the deck profile, but I've been kind of flip-flopping between Emile and Lolotte lately, and I do just want to kind of get that out of the way before we get into anything, because a lot of people are going to be experimenting a lot with Lolotte as a starter once we get the new cards in Overdress, because counter charges are going to be a lot more necessary, to say the least, when we get to that point. But yeah, guys, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get right in. So let me clean this up. And okay, so we've got the starter here, still Emile. Emile does so much work, guys. That's why I'm kind of still sticking with her. Now, previously, and I say previously as in just a few weeks ago, I was on Lolotte as a starter just because I've changed the grade 3 ratios just a little bit in order to make Leontina just a more stable card to go into. And that includes just striding stability in general. But the thing about Lolotte is that she doesn't fill the soul as efficiently as Emile does. And also Emile allows you to filter your deck going into late game, which allows you to get triggers more easily off of your drive checks. Very important, because we don't really have high shield value in our hand just by our ordinary plays. And Doriane is providing some form of draw power at the end of the turn, but the cards you draw into are most of the time not going to be fantastic shield value. So you want to have a way to filter out the deck with a card like Emile in order to get those high shield value cards more easily into your hand, such as Heal Guardians or Stride Fodder crits, which you'll see that we're running here in this build. And then, of course, as I said already, Emile allows you to get your soul built from the get-go, basically from turn 1, because this card's ability is available right from the moment you forerunner her. And it's important to mention, guys, that cards like Lolotte are not available to be put into the soul by this card's skill. So you will need a way to put Lolotte into the soul. That's kind of the risk that you're taking by running Emile as a starter. And you're also giving up the ability to guarantee yourself a grade 3 into hand if you run Emile as a starter instead of Lolotte. So again, those are kind of the risks that you're taking. But overall, because we've adjusted our build to take this into account, I think it's still fine to run Emile. And I will especially be running Emile once we get those new cards in set 8 of Overdress, because Emile will be able to search some of the new things, such as the order, into the soul very easily. It's kind of laughable that the wording of this card allows us to be able to accomplish something like that. So I'm still feeling Emile really well, but again, I do think there is merit in running Lolotte as a starter instead of Emile, just because you're able to guarantee yourself the grade 3 and the counter charges from early on in the game. All right, now let's go into the grade zeros and trigger units. We've got 4 copies of Nightmare Doll Lindy, the Heal Guardian. Still very important to be running Heal Guardians in this day and age in Premium. A lot of the time, Silver Thorn has very poor shield value early game, especially. Heal Guardians allow you to circumvent that just a little bit. It's still not comfortable, but you know, this gets the job done a lot better than 20k shield heal triggers from V. So it's important to be running this still. And actually, the most important part about Lindy is that she's a grade 3. This grade 3 symbol means that you're able to add her from soul to hand off of Lolotte, which is why, again, I was running Lolotte a few weeks ago as a starter. It really helps when you soul charge this off of something like Maricica or off of Irina's auto ability on rearguard circle when placed. So it's just really important to be able to have access to that early game when Silver Thorn, I feel, is most vulnerable. Now, it is something to be said that Silver Thorn likes to have counterblast early game, but in this meta, taking a lot of damage early is very undesirable because there are so many decks that can just 2 to 6 you, you know, wombo combo multi-attack on their first stride, and you'll be left suffocating to death without really much to fight back with. So, you know, I think Heal Guardians are still extremely important. Alright, and then next up we've got 4 copies of Convert Bunny. This is the new addition to my builds of Silver Thorn. I've been finding Stride Fodder crits to be excellent over running additional grade 3s just because they also provide some shield value. So that allows us to kind of decide whether we want to save some combo pieces and go into Stride with this, or we want to reserve the shield value and just discard a grade 3 that we know we don't need because let's say we have enough Excel markers. And for the Leontina build, you really only need 2 to 3 Excel markers especially. So we're able to get that if we just do our Venus Luquier turn, our grade 3 Venus Luquier turn without, you know, Doriane, then we're able to get 2 Excel markers off of that turn, and then the next time we ride into Venus Luquier, that would be the 3rd Excel marker. Or if we're going second, we would ride into Venus Luquier, get the Excel marker, and then we do Darklord Princess and Diva as our stride to get that 2nd Excel marker. And then on the following turn, we would go into Venus Luquier again to get that 3rd Excel marker, and then go into Leontina from there. So those are kind of the options available. Now, I will say that Convert Bunny, the most productive part about this card is that it's a crit. And I like maximizing the crits now for this build because we want to get our opponent close to lethal before our Leontina stride comes into play, just so that the Garter Strict becomes a lot more emphatic, a lot harder to disrespect. A lot of times people will be like, okay, upright line swinging for 62k and 1 crit with 2 or more Garter Strict, take it. I'm at 4 damage. I can just take it, right? And you don't want that to happen because then you'll be left in a position where, okay, I don't have any stands in this deck, which, yes, guys, we're not running any Prankster Mirrorlands, so we need to make sure that they're a little bit scared at 4 damage rather than just being like, okay, I'm just going to take the upright line, that's 62k, 2 or more Garter Strict. So that helps out a lot for this deck. Now, I will say that because it's not a Silver Thorn name, we'll have a lot of trouble sometimes with like, you know, soul charging this off like Maricica or something, where it'll kind of make our early game ride chain, so to speak, a lot weaker. And again, that's just the risk. There's a lot of risk you're taking with Silver Thorn as a deck when you're building it because the deck is so combo piece reliant. We just have to be willing to accept these downsides whenever we run support cards that provide some generic flexibility, such as Convert Bunny or any other Stride Fodder crit you'd run in any deck. So it's, you know, it's similar to Nightmare Doll Lindy in that regard. We're not Nightmare Doll where we have the privilege of having a Heal Guardian that's also in archetype. It's just silly that they've got that. But you know, Silver Thorn, we have not too much to work with, especially with cards from pre-V. Like the pre-V Silver Thorn pool of cards, just not too great aside from some killers in, you know, Zelma, Upright Lion, those kind of cards. But otherwise, we're left with little to push to the limits. So we do have to work with cards that are generic, that were provided in some of the premium collection support sets in the past couple of years. All right, and then next up we've got 3 draw PGs and one Dark States Overtrigger. So notice how I cut this down from 4 to 3. I do feel like draw PGs are still very important for Silver Thorn, mind you, but I also found myself needing to have another card I'm willing to search off of, like, let's say Emile or Irina or Maricica to the soul in order for what's that G Guardian called? The name escapes me currently, but it's the one that calls from soul to Guardian Circle. Though that's a way of our dodging Garterstrix, right? But in the past, since we were running 4 draw PGs, we literally need to, soul charge this draw PG randomly. Like, we wouldn't have a way of getting into the soul guaranteed in order to have that Garterstrix circumvention play available. But now that we're cutting down this draw PG to 3, we have the space to run an in-archetype PG in the form of Lydia, which you'll see in the grade 1 lineup. So that's why I did cut this down to 3. Now the risk of this is that we're not finding those draw triggers as often, which is definitely something that you feel for a deck like Silver Thorn, where the hand size element is it's very unfortunate, because I feel like the deck has a lot of potential, and literally the hit to Doriane just inhibited all of that. So it was necessary to run 4 draw PGs or some form of 4 draws. It's just not worth running vanilla draw triggers from V, because they just don't do enough on their own. So that's why we did have to find the draw triggers in the form of the draw PGs, which it's great, it's not bad, but now having to make space for getting around Garterstrix, such as OTT's Garterstrix, such as Royal Paladin's Crystal Lister Dragon Garterstrix, and Chainring Core if you face Shadow Paladin decks that play that, although most Shadow Paladin decks that are meta and premium right now are not running Chainring Core because it's Luard. But anyway, I mean, okay, if they're running V Luard, I guess Chainring Core is reasonable. But anyway, this is why we have to cut this down to 3. Now, you could run 4 and just cut Lydia. That gives some extra deck space as well for other potential cards that we're not running, such as Cat 9 High Boots. I did decide to cut Cat 9 High Boots from the Goman build because, it's just not... It's not super smooth of a integration for Silver Thorn. It's out of archetype. It doesn't. It's not consistent to finding the soul. The new G Guardian does help a lot, and actually that was one of the reasons why I even considered it in the first place, because we have a way of getting it from hand to soul properly now. But it's still just not stable enough to make it worth it. The one slot in the deck space, but it is a nice option, of course. If you want to free up deck space, you can run the 4th draw PG and then maybe cut. I'd say it's hard, because you do still want to run 4 of the Stride Fodder crit, but it's a tough decision to make. But I still like the 3 draw PGs so far in my testing, and then 1 Dark States Overtrigger. Okay, finally for the triggers, we've got 4 copies of Dixie. Guys, please, I just highly suggest not skipping out on this card. This card is way too important for the stability, consistency, making sure that we get our combo plays every stride turn for the deck. It's just way too important to be able to get your board built off of just this one card, going into Selvia, using the Selvia Counterblast, go into like Zelma and Upright Lion, and then use the Zelma to put Selvia back in the soul, call it back out, then you build your board from there, right? I know that's very Counterblast heavy, but it's the main way we need to be able to build our field after striding, because remember, each turn we're sucking all of our rear guards back into our soul. We need to have a way to build that board back out without going through too many hoops. Now, this might sound like a lot of hoops, but the fact that this is going back to deck when we use it means that it's not that big of a deal, guys. This is just way too important. It's a 5 crit, yes, but it's a recursive 5 crit that also works extremely well in tandem with Emile, our starter, to make sure that we're filtering our deck and getting those triggers, getting the density of triggers in our deck to a very high ratio, very high percentage. So this card is just still phenomenal. I feel like it's just one of the best pieces that we have available for Silver Thorn, and definitely one of the stars of the pre-V Silver Thorn card pool. All right, and then finishing off our other grade zeros, we've still got 2 Lolottes. I mentioned this already. You can decide to run this as a starter instead, but again, it's just like you are missing out. It's pros and cons, right? It's not clear cut which one is the best one to run, but I will say that I've just been liking Emile for a lot more for the reasons I've mentioned already. Now we do have to run the 2 Lolotte because if one goes to damage, if we're running only one copy and one goes to damage, we just auto lose because Lolotte is just an anchor for the deck. You know, it's like if you don't have it, then you're done. Silver Thorn just doesn't work. You know, it's already combo and piece reliant enough already, and losing a card like this makes it such that you just can't really pull off much to scare your opponent into submission to the circus of the Silver Thorns. Now, the same could be said for Doriane, but again, Doriane's at 1. I don't know what Bushiroad is, you know, doing at this point. Maybe they've just forgotten that the card exists. No Pale Moon deck is gonna break Silver Thorn at more than 1. I mean, let's just be honest. Even having 2 is probably fine. I would be perfectly content with just having access to 2 Doriane in my Silver Thorn builds. Like I don't know why it's still at 1, but alas, yeah, that's what we've got to deal with, guys. But again, if you run Lolotte as a starter, you get the play to guarantee yourself the grade 3 to hand, as well as getting that counterblast back from a card like Lilian that you might have used, or a card like Maricica. Or if you use both, perhaps thanks to Anna giving you a counter charge for the first time, then you'd be able to get those. You still be able to get the counter charge back while getting all of the benefits that you're able to get access to from the grade 2s that you played, such as Maricica and Lilian. That's all for the grade 0s, guys, and trigger units. Let's go into the grade 1s. So here begins already where I'm kind of deviating from previous builds I've shown on this channel. We're running for Irina, yes, but notice that it's a 2-2 split of V Irina and OG series Irina. I'm calling OG series because, you know, the original Vanguard wasn't called a series or anything. This was pre-G, in fact. So let's go over why I would want to run a 2-2 split of these versions of Irina rather than just the 4 V Irina. I've said in the last video where I went over the Goman build of Silver Thorn, I started feeling a little differently about Irina compared to how I felt about her in the past. Basically, to summarize things, I feel like Irina doesn't do enough beyond the V Irina I'm talking about. Does not do enough beyond the very first turn of the game where you'd want to have in your hand to ride. Because the ability to, when placed from hand, look at the top 2 cards of your deck and put 1 card into the soul and the one on the bottom, just not consistent, stable, or productive enough for the deck at that stage of the game. Pretty much all I found this Irina to be useful for beyond the first turn of the game is just the 10k shield. I found myself like always saying, okay, if I find Irina beyond this point, I'm just going to be keeping her in my hand and dropping her as a 10k shield, which is good. I mean, it's not bad, but again, I just feel like the card didn't do enough. And to warrant running it at 4 copies and then never seeing it, because there are times where even at 4 copies, you just don't open it or you don't find it for your grade 1 ride, and it's just awful, man. Like I wasn't really liking the productivity of the card over time. So the solution I thought of was to just run 2 more of these older Irinas. Now, why are these older Irinas even worth considering? I mean, they're 5k shield, they're 7k, which both sound like pretty, you know, significant downsides. Like they don't seem to be worth the trouble to go through in terms of what we're giving up on the 10k shield and the 8k base. Given that especially Silver Thorn's defensive hands early game are quite poor. So why would we play into that even further with something like this? Well, so here are some considerations why I think this card is actually really good to run in tandem with V Irina. 1, the 7k base actually means that you'll be able to swing under a lot of decks in the first turn of the game if you go second. And going second is kind of Silver Thorn's main weakness. Like the first stride is honestly like it's okay. Like Darklord Princess and Eva, it's not terrible, but it's also not too insane compared to like Nightmare Doll's Darklord Princess and Eva, where they get like a mini Nightmare Doll loop plus getting the Excel markers, the card advantage, and at the end of the turn refunding the counterblast with something like I can't remember the card, Abigail I think it's called, the counter charger that Nightmare Doll has. But anyway, being able to damage deny them by swinging under from that phase of the game means that you'll still be able to get the drive check, which is very important because again, Silver Thorn's hand size is not very good, right? But also you won't be giving your opponent damage. So okay, that's enough to probably justify the 7K right now. Of course, if you're going second, and they ride up to grade 2, you're going to be in a worse position defending because you're at 7K rather than an 8K. But again, you know, pros and cons, right? Second reason why this card is worth running, and it's all in the effect. The 5K shield, obviously, nothing great about that. I mean, if it were a 10K shield, I would be running 4 of this probably. But it's a 5K shield, so we cannot really max it out as we would otherwise. The ability is why we're even considering this card as a huge pro. I can pull it close to the camera just for those of you that have not read the ability before. When this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle or Rearguard Circle, if you have a Vanguard Silver Thorn in your card name, you look at the 2 cards from the top of your deck, search for up to 1 card with Silver Thorn in its card name from among them, put it into your soul, and put the rest in the bottom of your deck in any order. So why is this significant and why is this worth running? The main reason why I was hating this card past turn 1 is the auto ability on place in Rearguard Circle is when placed from hand. This card does not specify when placed from hand. This card is when placed from anywhere, which means that if we need additional combo pieces in our soul or just additional filtering to help support Emile, we'll be able to do that with this card if we call off something like Selvia or Zelma, which means that the on place will trigger, which allows us to check the top 2 and filter just a little more, find those combo pieces that we're missing maybe. Now, why is this significant again, beyond the fact that it doesn't need to be placed from hand in order for it to trigger? The fact that you can do it when placed from anywhere means that you can do it when placed from battle phase, during the battle phase as well. Something that Emile is not able to do because it's an activated ability is that it's not able to, when you call it out during the battle phase, go back in the soul, check top 5 for those grade 3, grade 2, grade 1 cards to filter the deck even more and get more combo pieces into the soul. However, Irina is able to do this on our first stride, especially when we know our first stride is focused on utility and setting up for that Leontina 1-2 punch. Irina is able to be called out during the battle phase, let's say during our Hari turn first stride or during our Darklord Princess Yvette turn, which allows us to go through our deck even more and find those pieces, a little filtering as well. But basically it's able to do that a little bit more flexibly because it's able to do it when placed as an auto ability rather than an activated ability. So overall, I feel like those are good reasons to be able to be willing to run this this version of Irina at 2 copies. And also, the reason why I'm like okay with running it at 2 copies is that it's not like that bad riding it as your grade 1 ride. I've already mentioned the 7K base swinging under point, but this card still works when placed on Vanguard Circle. It still does something. So of course you're not getting as many cards in the soul as you would with like this Irina when rode upon. But again, we have Emile for that, so it's not a huge deal that we're not able to do that from turn 1. The most important part about writing it is that now it's in your soul for the rest of the game, which means that you'll be able to call it back out, put it back in the soul, call it back out for its auto ability multiple times in that manner. So I hope I've convinced you guys that this 2-2 split is probably where I'll be going for the future in terms of like the best way to run Irina in this deck. All right. Next for the grade 1s, 4 copies of Anna. Oof. 4 copies, huh? A lot different. I feel like I've gone up on the ratios of this card over time. Like at some point I was thinking of 2 copies, and then, you know, most recent builds I've been running 3, and now I'm running 4. What's going on? Anna is, I keep saying she's okay, and that's basically still how I feel about her. She's okay. She's not like amazing, but you have to run her because you need the counter charges. There's no 2 ways around it. The card just fulfills a purpose and role that is needed to be filled by Silver Thorn because the deck is so counterblast heavy. I mean, you just need to run counter chargers that you're able to actually use, which, you know, since it's Silver Thorn, we're able to use it. Now that being said, the reason why we're running 4 instead of 3 now is that we need to have another comfortable ride target because we're dropping the number of copies we're running of V Irina, which is our previous comfortable ride target. But now for this build, we want to be willing to have, you know, the high roll, so to speak, of either Lilian plus Maricica plus Anna as the grade 1 ride target in our hand, or just having Maricica, which you know, you ride the Maricica, you counterblast, soul charge 3, and then you countercharge, and that would be like the situation if you didn't have Lolotte available to go into off of the Lilian. The reason why these are significant plays is because we're running Emile as a starter. So again, we just need to have another card to be able to ride into comfortably for those situations that allow us to still kind of keep our counterblast available in the damage zone while also getting our soul set up sufficiently for future turns. And again, another reason why it's 4 copies is that we need to have one of these in soul at some point in the game. Otherwise, we're kind of in trouble in terms of our combo plays and how many counterblasts they take. But once you got that one in soul, you don't really need the other 3 copies. So you can save these for guard value in your hand. 10k shield is really nice to have. And I think another reason why I was convinced that 4 copies is fine is, again, we've dropped the Irina, we dropped V Irina down to 2. And because we're running the 5k shield Irina, we need to have alternate methods of guarding with 10k shield, especially given that the rest of our grade 1 lineup is not really that great in shield value, which you'll see pretty soon here. But that's Irina, or that's Anna, pardon me. And last but not least, we've got, or this is not last but not least, this is, we got one more to go after this for grade 1s. But we got 4 copies of Zelma. So, Zelma is still the best combo grade 1 for Silver Thorn. And the buyout I saw for this card recently is kind of, says it all. This card will continue to be run in Silver Thorn decks, from here on out. It's just such an important card. And honestly, I hope they reprint it. If they really care about Silver Thorn, they would probably reprint this card because it's been, I believe, 8 years. I want to say 8 or 9 years since this card was first printed. And it's a rare, right? In a rare, it sounds like low rarity. But rares were actually only one per pack at that time period. So it's not like nowadays where we have 2 rares per pack in a 7-card pack. We back then it was actually 1 rare in a 5-card pack. So these were a lot harder to obtain. And especially now that it's been 9 or whatever years, it's very hard to come by this card. So I'm pouring one out for you guys that we're unable to get this before the buyout, but hang in there. Hopefully we get a reprint. Anyway, Zelma, so good, right? Because she's the combo piece, she's the combo enabler, she's also the multi-attacker enabler during the battle phase because you're able to sweep in a Silver Thorn, call another one back out like a Selvia or a Lilian for that beat stick. And then you're also able to use this early game just in case you went into Lilian as your ride. You'd go into Lilian and get Lolotte, and then you'd place some other rear guard from your hand. Let's say it's Anna, and then you would play Zelma on the rear guard circle. You'd put Anna into the soul, and you would call out Lolotte. That way you have Lolotte to use her end of turn skill, and you get these both into the soul, countercharge, and add a grade 3 to your hand, which would be, of course, the Venus Luquier that you probably have in your soul at that point, thanks to either Emile or Maricica or otherwise. So Zelma is so good; it performs all of those functions. And I know a lot of people were running this at 3, and I think I myself was running at 3 at one point. But we got to run 4 of this nowadays because, again, I know we still have Emile in the deck, but we just need to be a lot more consistent with how we're running this because this is, again, a Leontina build. We're a lot more piece reliant than we were in the past, if we weren't already. So we just need to have a very comfortable way of getting our combos out with more stability. All right, and then finally we've got 1 copy of Lydia. I mentioned this kind of when I was talking about the draw PG Hades Hypnotist. Lydia is basically in the deck in order to have a way of using Wandering Dragon. Now I remember the name of the G Guardian, of course. Wandering Dragon is the G Guardian that allows you to call something from your soul to the Guardian Circle. And Lydia is a PG that is able to work when placed from anywhere. No matter where she's placed, as long as she's placed in Guardian Circle, it doesn't matter from hand, from soul, from anywhere. So having this available in order to circumvent guard restricts with Wandering Dragon is very nice. Now, this is not really like a problem necessarily, but one thing you do have to keep in mind is that it's 6k and not 7k like the V series grade 1 PGs are. But the reason why we have to run her and not one of those V series grade 1 PGs is that she's the Silver Thorn name, which makes her searchable. So again, if we're in the matchup like OTT, where we need to have a normal unit PG in our hand, we'd want to make sure to not put this in our soul. We want to make sure to get this in our hand at some point, hopefully draw into it, so that we have this available in the Ichikishima turn. Or if we're facing any deck that has a nasty guard restrict, when we go into Wandering Dragon, we want to be able to have this in the soul. That way we can call it out and then discard, get the PG effect. But basically, we have to run it because it's a Silver Thorn name. So I already talked about the sacrifices that come into play when we run this instead of running the 4-drop PGs. But if you need to watch back over that, feel free to rewind, do whatever you need. I'm not going to go too much in depth because I do want to get to the grade 2s and 3s. So grade 2s, not much has changed from previous builds that I've shown on this channel. We still got the 4 Lilian. No reason to run this at less than 4. This is really the most important searcher for the deck. It searches any Silver Thorn into the soul. Usually you'll be going into Lolotte with this because Lolotte is high priority. But if you already have Lolotte in the soul or in the hand or something, then you'd probably next in priority would get either Doriane or Selvia. Usually it's going to be Selvia. It depends really just based on how your hand is looking, how much you can stabilize by the time you need either of those cards for your combos. If you're going first, I'd say Selvia is probably the better one to get unless you already have it available. If you already have Selvia available, then Doriane's definitely the one to get. Selvia just makes sure that you're able to get the combos off with board building, especially for later in the game when you go into your strides. And then Doriane, of course, is the card draw engine, which, you know, again, since it's a one-of, if it goes to damage, you're in big trouble. But it's not as bad as if Lolotte goes to damage and we didn't have another copy of it. So that's why Lolotte is the highest priority for Lilian searches. The nice thing about Lilian as well, it's also a beat stick. So this means it's worth putting into the soul and calling it out on the Leontina turn or any other turn where you need additional attackers. That way you can get this to 19k if you have 4 different names of Silver Thorn in the soul, or you can get this to 24k if it's on an Excel circle. So oops, you can't see that, it's a little glary, but 24k is where it can get on an Excel circle, which is really nice. So Lilian's great. And then next up, we've got 3 copies of Maricica. So Maricica is probably our best ride target for grade 2. Now we're still running it at 3 because running it at 4 is a little awkward. It's not like Anna where, you know, it's like a 10k shield once we don't need it, because we really only need 1 or 2 Maricica in the soul. For the Leontina combo specifically, having 2 is very nice, but it's not needed. We can just get away with running the 1. Or not running, having the 1 in the soul. But overall, it's just not a very, it's not a very productive or good card to have, like past the point where it's either in your soul or you've ridden it as your grade 2 ride. So that's why it's 3 copies. But you know, if I could run this at 4 and still be comfortable, I probably would, just to have an additional good grade 2 ride target. Because right now we're at 7 if you include Lilian. But Maricica is still very important because we want that maximal Leontina turn, which I'll go over a basic combo towards the end of this video just so you guys have an idea. And I say basic, but it's honestly going to get pretty insane. It's just that I want to make sure you guys are aware of what you can pull off with this build of Silver Thorn ever since P Clan Collection 2022. So that's Maricica. And then we've got 2 copies of Selvia. This is the most important combo enabler for building our boards and making sure that we can land the fatal pushes on our Leontina and previous turns on our opponents. We're running this at 2 because, again, you need only 1 in your soul or in rotation just in general in order to be able to pull off everything that you're able to do with this deck. But you don't want one to go into damage zone and not have any others available, so that's why we have the 2 copies. You typically won't be calling this on your grade 2 turn. You'll typically be calling this on your grade 3 turn just to make sure that you build the boards and put pressure on your opponent. But if you have to ride this, it's not terrible because we have Emile as a starter. There will more than likely be some targets to call off of this ability when we get Emile Silver Thorn cards into the soul. Now you could run 3 of this if you just, you know, want to offload some of the work that Lilian has to put in order to find the missing pieces that we need for our combos. 3 is not a bad thing in my opinion, but the cards that we'd have to cut in order to run this at 3 is a little, you know, it's a little iffy. You know, probably the first thing in mind that I would cut to run this at 3 is like something like Anna, but that's a 10k shield card, so it's a little risky. And considering that we need only 1 of this again in a rotation, it's like maybe not the right idea. But it's an option to run this at 3. Since we have Emile as a starter, I think 2 is fine. If Lolotte is your starter, however, I think 3 makes sense. And finally, we've got 3 copies of Upright Line. This is the main reason why we go into all the combos that we do. We want to make sure to stack this card to upwards 50k, 60k, in order to make our opponent scared to death about the circus that Silver Thorn is able to pull off. Now, keep in mind that since we're running 3, 2 is most of the time what we'll be able to pull out when we get into the Leontina turn, which is fine because 3XL markers is not unusual for what we are able to accomplish with this deck. Now, also, the fact that we're running Emile as a starter means that 3 makes a lot more sense, but you could run 4 of this theoretically. It's just not as good early game. 3 I think is kind of the sweet spot. It's always been a pretty solid ratio for this card. Now, looking towards the future when we get the new cards in Set 8 of Overdress, where we might shift the build towards a multi-attack build rather than a stacking upright line with the guard restrict build. I do think this card would be cut for something like Rising Dragon, or I shouldn't say I think. It more than likely will be cut for Rising Dragon that's in Overdress, just because the multi-attack build wants to get that 35 or 30k swing multiple times rather than swinging maybe once or twice with a 50k number. But the 2 builds have their own merits, and perhaps a build with upright line will still be in consideration once we get those new cards in Overdress. I'll still have to kind of think through it myself, but do make sure that this is still in the back of your mind for the future of Silver Thorn in Premium. Okay, that's all for grade 2s. So, grade 3s now. We've got very simple grade 3 lineup, and I can present it all at once. In fact, I'm going to present it along with a grade 4 that we're running in tandem with these grade 3s. We're running 4 copies of Venus Luquier, 1 copy of Doriane, and 1 copy of Megalorude, our Ringer grade 4. So we'll go over them in order of in order from left to right. So I'm running 4 Venus Luquier, upped from 3 copies in previous builds I've shown this channel. The reason why we upped it to 4 copies is that I cut Luquier Reverse. Leontina doesn't really need Luquier Reverse, I'm going to be honest. Luquier Reverse provided an excellent way of generating more Excel markers for strong Hari turns down, in the later stages of the game. But the problem with Venus Luquier is that you need to see it. If you don't see it, it does nothing. Not to mention the fact that we were needing additional grade 3s to discard for Stride because we weren't running Stride fodder. So that was also an important reason why we needed additional grade 3s, and Luquier Reverse just happened to be the one that was the least bad to run. Of course, Stride bonus Luquier is not terrible either, but not as good for the Leontina build. So that's why we've upped Venus Luquier to 4 copies. But to be honest, you don't really need that many grade 3s for this build because we still have Lolotte and we still have Stride fodder crits to discard for Stride, so you don't really need that many grade 3s. But maximizing the number of Venus Luquiers means that we'll be able to ride this more often, because this is our, this is the ride we want to see anyway, and we'll also be able to see this more often. So, it's the double function. And then 1 Doriane. Again, I've already said that if I could run more than 1, I would. I'll probably run 2 or 3 if it comes to that. If Bushiroad allows it to be free, but for now it's not. This is the draw engine. If it goes to damage, you cry and you probably lose. It's not as auto lose as Lolotte, but still pretty bad. Okay, I mean running 2 Lolotte, that's the difference, right? Because Lolotte's not limited to 1. But if this card goes to damage, because it's limited to 1, if it goes to damage, you kind of cry and lose, probably. This also protects your field, because when you go into Stride turns, you're not able to protect your field with Venus Luquier, so you need a way of doing it otherwise, and Doriane is the best way to do it. Of course, if you go into Yvette, you'll be able to protect your field a little bit. It's still not to the same extent that Doriane can, because it literally protects your whole field. But, similar idea, I guess. If you do Yvette, you still have also Lolotte, which kind of protects another rearguard. Let's say you have an upright line that's still lingering and you weren't able to pull off Doriane, then you need to make sure that you use Lolotte to put upright line or something that's important on your field into the soul. That way you can protect it from removal that your opponent has. Finally, Megalorude. So I'll spend a little bit more time talking about this, because the other 2 you've seen quite a bit if you watch my previous deck profiles. Megalorude, this card I've kind of talked about in the overview of the new Silver Thorn cards video that I did a couple weeks ago. This card is not good. Let's just be real, right? But the value it provides in extending our Leontina combos, I think, made it worth the shortfalls that are inherently come along with this card. why is this card bad in the first place, you might be wondering. It's 0 power, okay? I mean, I think that's enough to say that it's bad. Honestly, the rest of the characteristics of the card are fine. Like, I mean, when it's placed on rearguard circle from soul by the ability of our Vanguard, we choose one of any player's rearguards and put it into that player's soul. And then if a card was put, it gets plus 15k. Like, that's not a terrible ability. It is kind of worded such that it's not. It seemed like they didn't want it to be too good, because it has to be placed on the rearguard from the soul by the ability of your Vanguard. So there's only a couple cards that can actually do that. Of course, Venus Luque can do it, but there's not a really useful point to be doing it on our first grade 3 turn with Megalorude. So there goes that, unless there's a card that we want to remove from our opponent's field that early on, but otherwise not really that useful. This becomes more useful when you go into your Darklord Princess in the Yvette turn. You probably want to call this out if you want to remove an opponent's card, or even better, you want to call this out when you go into Leontina, which allows you to extend a little bit. The reason why this card allows you to extend is that you can put your own rearguard into your soul, which frees up some rearguard circle space without having to overload one of your circles. Overloading circles in Vanguard means that you'd be calling on top of a rearguard that's already there, and the rearguard that's already there is going to retire immediately. And oftentimes for Silver Thorn, you don't want to do that because then you lose the card forever. There's no way to get cards back from the drop zone with this deck, so you don't want to be doing that most of the time. Megalorude, when called during the Leontina turn, allows you to free up some space. You know, for example, slide in something that we've called out from Soul. We've already expended the auto ability, perhaps. We go into Megalorude, frees up that space, and then we put Megalorude back into the Soul because we don't need it anymore. Because you know, the 15k is nice, but it's not anything that's gonna encourage us to keep it on the field compared to something like Lilian or Upright Lion. So that's the merit that this card provides, guys. Now, obviously, you never want to ride this because you'll just be in huge trouble. I mean, zero power for the rest of the game. Good luck. You're never going to survive against any deck in the meta if you try to ride this. So the whole point of this card is to get in the soul by means of Irina in our grade 1 lineup, or by soul charging it with Maricica, or the most common way to get in the soul that I've done. I mean, you can't call it from hand. That's why it's kind of tricky to get this in the soul by traditional means. But thanks to our new G Guardian that we got in Peak Line Collection 2022, you're able to get this card into the soul a little bit more stably, like a little bit more consistently, because you can put this in hand to soul with Flexion Chimera. So that's a reason why I decided that, okay, we can finally comfortably run this, but it's still not an amazing card. And if it goes to damage, we couldn't care less. So that's why it's a one-off. Okay, guys, thanks for making it through the main deck with me. So let's go ahead and talk about the G-Zone. The G-Zone hasn't changed too much. Like, the only difference is that we've kind of tailored it to some Leontina, like some of the most important Leontina plays, but otherwise it's not really that much different from, your typical Silver Thorn G-Zone. So we still got the one copy of Mystique Luquier. This is not really something you'll go into at any point with this build, but it's in here just in case we don't have any face-up damage available in our damage zone. We're able to use this to basically build our board without using a counterblast, because we'll be able to get the net counter charge by using this card's ability to call out something like Anna and then maybe a Maricica. And then the Maricica calls out a Selvia. The Selvia calls out more things, but make sure, of course, that Anna countercharge before you use the Selvia ability. But anyway, you'll be able to build your field without having any face-up damage. But otherwise, this card is not something you'll go into. It's just not as good for this build since we're not running Goman to, exploit the fact that this card works with Goman. It's funny, but this card doesn't, it's not really that amazing. It's probably flip fodder most of the time. But don't be so ready to like flip this up, because you do want to have this available just in case you don't have any counterblast. But again, not the go-to card in the G-Zone. This is the go-to card, however. 2 copies of Trenchant Megatrick Leontina. So Leontina, as I mentioned, is the win condition for this build. You'll typically be going into the second stride or later. The reason why you don't want to do this first stride is that your opponent won't have enough damage most of the time in order for this card to be effective first stride. First stride, you want to just kind of set up your soul. You want to make sure to build your hand. You want to make sure to push your opponent to a lethal damage range, but not quite 5 damage, maybe, just in case, you want to give yourself a little bit of room to either give them less damage that they can work with on their following stride, or just make sure that they're threatened by crits, perhaps that you would check off at the top of your deck, thanks to Dixie being a recursive trigger that always goes back. Now, I do want to point out about Leontina that when you attack with her, you're putting all the cards from your field into your soul, which means that you have to build your field back out with this card's ability. So do make sure that you have enough cards on the field in order to call out twice as many. It's usually not hard to accomplish that. If you have 3 Excel markers, which what I mentioned is not unusual at all. In fact, that's pretty typical. You have the 3 Excel markers plus the 5 rear guards, which makes 8. That means you'll want to have at least 4 rear guards to call to the field off of either Selvia plays from Dixie, in your hand, or just hard calling 4 cards from your hand to the rear guard circle. Not ideal, but still gets the job done if you want to make sure that this card can go off and fill all of your circles in that manner. Now, I'll go over the combo at the end of this video. Trust me, guys, it's kind of hard to put into words without demonstrating, and I feel like it'll be a lot more helpful to demonstrate it. So we'll get to that, but at the end of the video. But this card is the winner here for Silver Thorn, and at the end of 2022 and going into 2023, I hope it'll put in a lot of work. All right, and then the Darklord Princess package, we're still running just the 2 Darklord Princess. We're running the 1 Yvette, and then we're running 3 Hari. This is the difference from kind of previous decks. I think I might have already mentioned that 3 Hari was the way to go. But anyway, the reason why we want 3 Hari is that if we want to go into Hari twice, we don't need to run the 4th Hari, because it does persona flip for its ability. But the thing about Darklord Princess is that she strides a face-up G unit. So basically what you can do, instead of running the 4th Hari, of course it frees up some space, right? You stride into Darklord Princess. The first time you stride into Darklord Princess, you would turn face up this Hari for cost, and then you'd stride it, right? This goes to rearguard circle. And then you'd counterblast persona flip. So this would be face up in your G zone. And then at the end of the turn, all of these are going to go away, right? The second time you go into Darklord Princess, let's say this happens. I mean, this is not typical, but because this is a Leontina build, but let's say it does happen, right? You go into Darklord Princess again. You would turn face up, something. Make sure it's not the 3rd Hari. Make sure it's something else. But you would turn face up something. Let's say you turn face up Mystique Luquier. And then you would stride a face up G unit. In this case, you would stride Hari, and Dark Princess goes to rearguard circle. And then you still have that extra Hari to persona flip with, because you didn't stride that one. You didn't turn face up this one to stride. You already had the face up Hari from previous turns, so why would you turn face up this one when you need to keep it for your persona flip? So this allows us to run the 3. This allows us to run 3 instead of 4, which saves up some G zone space. And it's not like we really are focused on Hari for this build of Silver Thorn anyway, so it's not really like something that we want to run 4 of in the first place. So it's still 2 Darklord Princess. You really don't need more than 2. And then Yvette, again, you don't need more than 1. Yvette doesn't even need to persona flip, so she just flips up anything. So you can always go into her a second time if you need to go into Darklord Princess into Yvette twice for some reason. Usually you shouldn't, but if you needed to, then it's available. The nice thing about Yvette is that it doesn't require any counterblast, and also gives you Excel markers. But early game is where Excel markers are more useful than late game, so typically you won't be doing this more than once. And then Hari is a great option for finishing when you are in kind of a crunch and you can't pull off the Leontina combo, perhaps due to some missing combo pieces. But I mean, it's like Leontina is better than Hari for finishing, but Hari can still get the job done basically. And it's important to have this in your G zone for the Link Joker matchup, because you want to be able to unlock your circles basically, because it does allow you to put cards on your circles rather than rear guards. I believe Leontina does say rear guards, so that's the unfortunate part. She doesn't work as smoothly against the Link Joker matchup, so that's why it's still nice to have this available. All right, and then last for the strides, 1 copy of Furnival. If you're not able to get your hands on this, you can literally replace this with anything. It's just nice to have this in the late stage of the game where perhaps you're about close to deck out and you need a way to get some triggers back into your deck just to finish them off. The nice thing about this is that it does allow you to prevent the card you call from the soul from being chosen by card effects. So if you call something upright line, then you'll be able to protect it from some of the G Guardians that can get in the way of Silver Thorn. And Denial Griffin is the lethal blow to this deck, so you do want to make sure to give some insulation against that. But the problem with this card is that it does cost 2 counterblast and it is a GB3, so it never comes up in the stage of the game where it would be most relevant. So that's why it's not necessarily 100% necessary to run this. But again, it's still nice to be able to go into this just in case it does come to it. Now, keep in mind when the can't be chosen by card effects, that means it also can't be chosen for triggers. So you cannot apply a 10k crit that you drove check to your upright line or whatever you call it from this ability. Just make sure to keep that in mind. For the G Guardians, this is where there are some changes, but you know that's to be expected given the new set that we got last year. 1 Furnival, 1 Coulthard, 2 Flexion Chimera, and 2 Wandering Dragon. So Furnival is still pretty good. It allows you to selectively get a piece that you haven't found into your soul, and it gives you an extra 5k shield if it's a grade 1 or greater that you put into the soul. So it's not terrible. 20k shield for not much of a cost is pretty good. And then Coulthard is still one of the worst G Flipper G Guardians in the whole game. I mean, 4 or more different grades is not hard for this deck to come by, especially now that we're running Megalorude. But I mean, for the payoff is just not that great. Your G flipping for an extra 15k shield is like okay, sure, not really that good. This is where we get to the good stuff. Flexion Chimera. This card is like, people first read it and it's like, whoa, it's a Denial Griffin, right? But this card is so easy to play around that the Denial Griffin aspect of the effect is not really something worth highlighting. Of course it does come up, and when it does come up, it's like yay, but it's very easy to play around, so it's not something that I think is worth highlighting about the card. The part that's worth highlighting about this card is that it gives Pale Moon decks a way to get cards from hand into the soul, perhaps combo pieces that are missing from there, during the opponent's turn. Oftentimes, cards that you drove check are not able to begin, you're not able to get them into soul in time, maybe for your combos, or cards that you drew off of a draw PG that you checked on the damage check. You wouldn't be able to get those either. But Flexion Chimera gives us a way to get cards from hand to soul that are especially not Silver Thorns in a much more stable manner. And plus, it gives us some massive shield value. It gets plus 10 for each card you put into your soul. And there's no restriction on how many cards you can put in your soul for this card. You can put as many as you want. For each card, it gets plus 10k shield. So that's pretty nice. Now, of course, you're going minus. You're going a lot more minus for each card you put in from your hand to your soul. But again, Silver Thorn, the guard value, the hand quality is not really there anyway. A lot of those cards you want to put in the soul, and they're not even that much shield value. So, like, who cares? You're turning like a 5k shield into a 10k shield, or you're turning a Megalorude into a 10k shield. That's still pretty good in my opinion. So, fantastic for this deck. Wandering Dragon is still, the one of the better G Guardians that Pale Moon has. We still got to run it at 2 copies. I've told you guys already about the Wandering Dragon into Lydia play for the PG from Soul, and the reason why Lydia is good for that again is because it's a Silver Thorn, so that means it's searchable. If you want anything else to be able to go into off of this card, I think one of the better options to go into is something like an Ana, or something like a trigger that might have been Soul Charged, such as Convert Bunny. That might have been Soul Charged off of either Wandering Dragon itself or off of Maricica. But typically, you're going to have Silver Thorns in the soul, so you'll have to be calling something like Ana, or something that you are willing to give up because you have a lot of copies of them already in the soul, and all you need is 1 for them, right? It's like Ana, you only need 1 in rotation, so it's not like really you're too perturbed by calling it out from soul if you already have more copies in there. That's it for the G Zone, and that's it for the entire deck profile. So the next part of this video will be going over some we'll go over some Leontina combos just so you guys have an idea. Of course, feel free to expand upon those combos on your own once we get to them, and of course also feel free to expand upon this deck on your own. There's a lot of things about this deck that are not necessarily like optimal, I would say. This is just what I've come up with for this current meta game for Silver Thorn, especially with the new cards that we've got. So I don't think this is like necessarily like the best Silver Thorn build in the planet, but it is a pretty good one. And upright line builds tend to be a surprise to a lot of people when they pull off the cool stuff. So there's that to be said. All right, now to the combos.